What's going on, y'all, ladies, gentlemen? Welcome back to another episode. Your favorite weekly film, better than I don't know what else you guys watch these days. You got looping on Netflix and shit like that, but better than whatever weekly film you were planning on watch. You got Noah, myself. We're gonna talk about the NFL later on. We're gonna talk about the NBA, and we're gonna talk about top shots. We got you covered for all the content needs that you have in this off season. Obviously, Super Bowl happened. Tom Brady's the GOAT. He's going to be the GOAT probably for a long, long time. Won his seventh Super Bowl. I called that on my show. I'm joking. I didn't call it. I just said I wish him luck, and I'm kind of glad that I got to see it play out. Patrick Mahomes got eaten up, man. Tampa Bay Buccaneers defensive lineman ate him up like fat kids on cake. So that was interesting to watch. And a lot of Patrick Mahomes slander on the timeline. I thought he did pretty good, but at the end of the day, it is what it is. But that marks the end, the official end of the football season. The football NFL 2020-2021 season is officially in the books and it's over. And you know what that means, man? It's the official kickoff of the Dynasty offseason. Noah, how you doing?
I was okay when the video started, and then you said Tom Brady would be the GOAT for a long time, as if Justin Herbert wasn't anointed the GOAT this past season. So that put me off a little bit. Also, we got a few haircuts going on, and Mike,
Yeah.
once the video started, he questioned what was going on with my hair. I've been questioning it myself as well. Mike's looking pretty on the other side of the screen. It's a new season, new us, whatever those Instagram quotes that your ex-girlfriend from seventh grade has been posting the past 17 years when she goes on vacation with her friends. New year, new us, new content. And today we're talking about who we're selling, which veteran players who've been in the league for 3 years or more that we're selling heading into this year. And I'm just going to tell you right now, you guys aren't going to be happy with some of the names that we have. They're not on like big teams, but they're probably on your fantasy team, which in turn makes you want to come at us in the comments. Come at us. We like a little healthy discussion. We like to talk through things. We like to take a deep breath and analyze the situation. So if you have any questions as to what you would sell them for, hopefully we answer those in the video. But if you have a scenario that you want to drop in the comments, hit us up and we'll get back to you and we'll give you our advice on things such as that. But until we get into that, I think we have to do something that's more important than probably the content of this video.
Let's get it going. I mean, everyone wants to be positive, everyone wants to be in the up and up. Everyone wants to go to the moon. Everyone wants to ride rocket ships. Everyone wants to get on the next GameStop before it tanks. But you know what, man? Someone's got to be the bearer of bad news, and that's us. We got to keep it real with you guys 100% of the time. Even if we stink, even if our takes stink, we're still keeping it real. And that's what some of this is, man. We don't want to be Debbie Downers, but at the end of the day, you kind of have to start looking at some of this stuff because, these guys, guys in the NFL aren't getting any younger, man. And selling old guys is a flavor of the month. But at the same time, we're not going to come here and tell you to sell like shitty stuff that you can't sell anything for, right? So that's the key, I think. The one thing before we get into any of the sells for veterans is a lot of times I go on Twitter and I see people like, oh man, like, oh, kill and Balaj, like sell high, like, oh, Nicole Hardman sell high, like,
I think the
oh,
issue there is you have to actually own Kalen Blash for you to be
yeah,
able to sell him high.
yeah, like, now people are like, oh, McCole Hardman, got to sell him high. Like, who are you selling these people high to? Like, who are these people that are in your leagues that are buying them? Like, a lot of the times, selling high on a player means you got to sell high on a good player because not everyone's out there trying to buy shitty players, man. Like, I mean, I'm sure you guys have a lot of like shitty players that you guys play with, but for the most part, I mean, if you play in some savvy dynasty leagues, like people aren't out there trying to buy really shitty players. I mean, you have the suckers, okay? There's a sucker in every league trying to buy low on Van Jefferson. That guy
Shout
exists.
out Pretty Richie buying Sammy Watkins for that Patrick Mahomes stack. That didn't really do too much, but we love you, Richie.
Yeah. Every league has someone that's a sucker that's trying to buy one of these shitty players, right? That have a really low odds of success. But that's not the norm. So you got to have guys that are actually, favorable to some that we're willing to sell high, and other guys that a lot of the guys that I say to sell high on is not because I think they're bad or they stink. It's just that, hey, I think that their value is capped, and whenever I see a capped value asset, I'm always looking for opportunities to trade down and get more assets. Those are the types of trades that I look to for the most part. So I'm not really in the business of telling people to sell shitty players because I mean anybody can do that. Just literally go on Twitter and you'll get plenty of advice like that. That's not what we're in the business of doing here at Bunkbed Breakdowns. We're trying to provide like actionable advice. Oh, sorry. turn my lights on so there's no shade on
Wow,
my
you're
face.
just really showing me up today. I'm recording in the dark right now. Crazy
Yeah,
glare off the
so
glasses too.
yeah, so it's not just about selling low and like selling shitty players. It's really about finding when to get out on really good assets as well. So before we just want to have that little preamble before we dive into things and just set the right frame of mind so that when we drop some of these names, you guys are like, wow, you guys fucking hate that guy. He's a stud. How can you be so stupid? It's not really that mind of frame of thinking. It's more just like, hey, let's explore what we can get out there for some of these guys, to make it interesting, right?
Yep. So countering Mike's point of not talking about shitty players, we're going to start with a shitty player, at least in my opinion. And by shitty, I don't mean like shitty because he is in the NFL and obviously he's better than I am, but I kind of question that. We have Jared Goff, the new quarterback of the Detroit Lions. Now, you would think that his ADP is a little bit suppressed because of that move. The ADP I'm using is from January, so I assume it's going to fall back a little bit. But even in January, he was being taken as the quarterback 15 off the board. And for me, at least, he is around that quarterback 20 range. And the reason for that, especially with this quarterback move, is sure, he's been good in the past, right? Looking at his fantasy finishes as of late, he's been the quarterback 17, 14, 7, and 9 on a point per game basis among quarterbacks who have played at least 10 games in those seasons. So if you look retrospectively, sure, he's being fairly valued in that sense. But when you look at the situation that he is now put in and the disparity between that situation and what he used to be in, first off, he goes from Sean McVay to fucking Anthony Lynn and Dan Campbell. So that off the bat should just tell you to fade him. But along with that, he goes from a situation that had at one point Todd Gurley in his prime, had Brandon Cooks, had Sammy Watkins, had Cooper Kupp, had Robert Woods, had Tyler Higbee. He had a lot of really good players. He had Cam Akers this past year. Then he goes to the Detroit Lions, who have a very talented rookie in DeAndre Swift and a really good tight end in TJ Hockenson. But in my opinion, those two pieces aren't going to really put you over the top in terms of a fantasy quarterback. And we've seen Drew Lock fail despite having talent. We've seen Eli Manning fail despite having talent. Just because you have talent doesn't mean you're going to be good. And the fact that he doesn't really have overwhelming talent leads me to believe that it's going to be a struggle, along with him having like small hands and playing in cold weather and playing really bad in cold weather. NFC North football probably isn't for him. Along with that, Marvin Jones and Kenny Golladay are free agents this year. So even if they bring back one or two of them, they franchise tag Kenny Golladay, what are the chances that they're there for the long term? So the longevity there, a lot of people make the argument that quarterbacks have a super, super long shelf life. And a guy like Jared Goff, who's what, like 26, 27 years old, oh, he could be a starting quarterback for 10 years. He's so young. Would you rather have the known commodity and Tom Brady these next 1 to 2 years of elite top 12 quarterback play, or bet on a Jared Goff who, in my opinion, probably has the same shelf life as a Tom Brady? And in those years when they're on the field together, when they're both playing concurrently, Tom Brady's going to blow him out of the water in terms of fantasy production. That was the argument I made for fading a guy like Drew Lock or Teddy Bridgewater this past year. Sure, they're young, but they're not really good. And when it comes to Dynasty, it's not always about getting the youngest asset. It's getting the one that may have the prime in those few years that they're in the league, rather than trying to chase upside through longevity and through lasting longer than another player because they're simply younger instead of actually being good at football. So when we compare him to guys in his range, right? Matthew Stafford, quarterback 16, I'm sure they will flip-flop with this change, so we'll kind of throw that out the window. But I'd rather have Kirk Cousins than him, who is quarterback 18 off the board, consistently undervalued. He's consistently like a top 12 to top 15 quarterback option. You can get him later. Sure, he's a few years older, but his contract is ridiculous. And he didn't just get traded and 3-round picks for a 33-year-old. So I'm sure the Vikings have a lot more faith in him than whatever the hell the Lions think that Jared Goff is. And as I said before, Tom Brady, just off the Super Bowl, this isn't even recency bias, right? Quarterback 20 off the board, just get the 2 years left that Tom Brady probably has of elite play surrounded by elite weapons. And now it's coming out that Mike Evans wants to take a pay cut to help bring back more weapons in this offense. There's no reason to get a guy like Jared Goff who has these 1 to 2 years when those 1 to 2 years probably aren't going to be good. And then the last point as well is he has a crazy contract, but he has a 0 dead cap hit after 2022. So he's probably just going to be a bridge quarterback anyways. And with how high of draft picks the Detroit Lions are looking to have these next few years, I think they're number 7 overall this year. Maybe they take a Jamar Chase and give him a weapon. But if you can't do anything with Jamar Chase, then he is probably going to be gone sooner rather than later. So just because he's younger doesn't mean you have to invest. And I think he's just a very mediocre quarterback who doesn't have the rushing upside to help build that floor week after week and year after year.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. This is, I think, in my opinion, the only really shit player on our list, and I don't even know what we can sell him for. But like, I think this is a case where I'm kind of happy to just sell low and see what happens, right? Maybe you can get like a first, right? A late first, someone that's QB needy. They think he's still young, and maybe they resign Kenny Galladay or whatever. But I think it's asinine that he gets ranked ahead of Kirk Cousins. I think that was ridiculous even before this year. I like Kirk Cousins better than Jared Goff. I think Kirk Cousins, like you said, is consistently underrated. And because he's 4 or 5 years older, who cares, man? He's like low 30s. Like that's still a decent amount of time for quarterbacks. So I agree with you. I mean, I would dump Jared Goff for, all those guys you said, but more importantly, I would dump him for like a couple second round picks and super flex, maybe even an early second, looking at a De'Ami Brown, looking at some of these other guys, or
Would you
even
rather have Mac Jones or Jared Goff?
That's tough because I don't know where Mac Jones is going to go in the draft. If he gets, let's say this, if Mac Jones gets draft capital, I'd rather have Mac Jones as draft capital. So
That's how it feels. Well, if he goes top 20 or if he goes to like New England or whatever, I would rather have Mac Jones because at least he's going to have the ability to show his worth. Whereas Jared Goff, if he fucks up once, he's probably not going to play much again in the future. Whereas Mac Jones might get 1 or 2 chances because he is a rookie and because he does have that Alabama pedigree.
Yeah. The one thing I will say about Jared Goff, though, I don't know if you saw the report, but basically the Carolina Panthers offered their 8th overall pick. They offered Teddy Bridgewater, I think, for Matthew Stafford, which, in my opinion, is a lot better than the 2022 and 2023 picks that they got from the Rams plus Jared Goff. So it could mean that, hey, they actually do like Jared Goff a little bit, at least a little bit. So it might give him a little bit more rope than we think. And then also it could mean that, like, one report I saw said that it was because they were pandering to Matthew Stafford, and Stafford didn't want to go play in Carolina. So, which also, makes a little bit of sense. I'd be surprised if that was the main reason, though, because at the end of the day, these guys are trying to run a business. So, but yeah, just something to keep in mind. But I totally agree with you. That's definitely a sell. I think, let's jump to one of my sells here real quick. I think actually our sells back to back are kind of similar. So I'm gonna go with mine first, but it's David Montgomery. And David Montgomery, I think, is interesting, right? Because people are gonna really think about how he took him to the championship. He had an incredible run. He was like top 3, maybe like top. Was he the running back 1 even for like that final?
Other than
I think he was running back 1.
That 6 touchdown game. So
yeah. I think other than Kamara, but then Kamara had like a bunch of shitty games in between too with Taysom Hill. So I think like David Montgomery was either like 1 or like at least top 3 guaranteed for like the back half of the season. Carried a lot of teams to championships, right? And that's great. So but I think whenever I see players like that do like kind of have that like championship attachment, it's like it's good to explore because people do have emotional attachments like that, But for me, I'm ready to punt David Montgomery off my teams anytime because at the end of the day, like they did have like a really, really easy schedule going down the stretch, and also Tariq Cohen was gone, so we don't know what's gonna happen with Cohen. But if Cohen comes back, you can expect him to eat a lot into that receiving share, which is part of the big reason why he was doing really well. And then also Trubisky's not back, and David Montgomery with Nick Foles is not good, right? Because I mentioned this before in the season, but he really benefited from Trubisky. Trubisky sucks as a passer. We all know that, right? But he does provide something on the ground, which Nick Foles did not. And a pocket passer does not help him. So, I mean, does Carson Wentz help him a little bit? Maybe. I mean, I don't know. But at the end of the day, like, it's just not a good offense I want to bet on. And I'm not even so sure that the Bears don't like add someone to the draft. Like, I don't know that. And so there's just a lot of question marks there. So, and I think I've been seeing him go for like running back 1 value. I mean, I have him ranked as my running back 20. DLF actually has him running back 20 as well. So from an ADP perspective, maybe it feels like I'm trying to sell at value, but I think realistically, in terms of trade value, we can get like if you can get like a mid first for him, I think that's super protected value. I'd rather have that. If you can get a first plus a late first plus a second, I think that's good value. I think you can pivot from him into one of our buy low wide receivers like Cortland Sutton, right? David Montgomery for Cortland Sutton plus. I bet money you will get that deal done, right? Cortland Sutton plus 2nd round pick for David Montgomery. Would you smash that?
It really depends on team need. I'm not as big of a proponent as selling Montgomery as you are, just because the price at running back 20, after him, there aren't really many guys that I have any faith in that can be even like a running back 2 on my roster, maybe a Damian Harris. But after that, it's slim pickings, and maybe you can re-roll the dice on an ETN or a Javonte Williams in the mid first. But then again, David Montgomery is not too old, and I feel like the NFC North might be Chicago's for the taking because Aaron Rodgers is getting older. He was a little bit unhappy. Jared Goff is now on a rebuilding team. The Minnesota Vikings don't have a defense. I don't think he's a huge sell candidate just looking at his price. But I mean, if you can get a Sutton in a mid round or a mid first or a Sutton in a second, you're having an embarrassment of riches at the running back position, then maybe that's something I'd explore. But for me, it's tough to sell a guy like Montgomery who, he definitely did struggle as a rookie, but he didn't put up a terrible season. when it's all said and done. And this past year, I think he proved that he can kind of be less of a guy who shows his hand when he's on the field, whereas Tariq Cohen, when he's out there, they're passing. David Montgomery is kind of agnostic in the sense that you don't know what the offense is going to do when he's on the field. So I'm a little bit bigger of a fan than Montgomery than you are, but that's not to say I'm not going to not sell him for anything.
Yeah. I mean, look, it's not that he's a bad player. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is I think his value, at least from a trade perspective, maybe not from an ADP perspective, but from a trade perspective, I feel like it's a good time to cash out. But again, just goes to show you can have different opinions depending on what your team needs are. Most of the time on my teams, if I have David Montgomery, he was not really my running back 1, running back 2, because I wasn't really high on him. The only reason I have him is because I bought him low on a couple of squads. So he's probably like my running back 3, 4. So at those types of positions, I'm basically willing to cash out, especially if I'm a rebuilder. I'm cashing out on him just to see what happens and store it in value elsewhere. So that's kind of where I'm at. I'm willing to trade for rookie picks or a wide receiver plus a rookie pick. So I think those are some decent deals that can be explored.
Yeah, and I'm in a similar boat with a guy like Josh Jacobs, the same running back class. And as you said, like Carson Wentz might go to the Chicago Bears and just fuck up David Montgomery. I'm waiting for him to go to the Las Vegas Raiders and just complete his tour of ruining every 2018 running back, whether it's Miles Sanders, David Montgomery, or Josh Jacobs. But looking at what Jacobs has done throughout his career, he's a very good running back on the ground, but that doesn't really do much for you in fantasy, right? Being really good between the 20s and having touchdown variance is not something I want to bank on, especially when he's being drafted as the 10th running back off the board. When you can have guys just looking at the price of other players, this is the only argument I need to make. Cam Akers, Antonio Gibson, Aaron Jones are the RB 14, 15, and 16 off the board. Straight up, I'd rather have all of them. Now you may say, oh, Aaron Jones, you'd rather have him than Josh Jacobs. To me, it's the same argument as the Jared Goff, Tom Brady thing. I'll take the next 2 or 3 years of Aaron Jones being a top 5, top 6, top 7 running back over Josh Jacobs being maybe the RB 12 or 13 on the season, which is what he's kind of been. But how many times this past season did you feel comfortable slotting Josh Jacobs into your starting lineup? The only times he ever gave you any sort of value was when he scored touchdowns. He's extremely touchdown dependent, and I know he was among the league leaders in touchdowns this year. He scored a whole bunch. But when you have to rely on a guy falling into the end zone and picking up 6 points because he's not getting chunk yardage, he's not used in the passing game consistently, and he's just all around not a great fantasy asset from that point of view, along with him continuously being banged up, missing a few games his rookie year. This year, I believe he only missed 1, but if you think back to the season, how many times was he on the injury report? How many times was he a game time decision? How many times did people want to pick up Devontae Booker because they thought he was going to break out and take his job? He's just too much of a headache for me to want to take him as the 10th running back off the board. And if somehow somebody will give you a Cam Akers or an Antonio Gibson for him straight up, I would do it. And honestly, looking at the running backs coming into this class, I think once you get into that Javonte Williams and Travis Etienne, that second tier for me, it's really a coin flip because I think both of those guys, Travis Etienne might not be a great pass catcher, but I think his breakaway ability will give you a little bit of something that Josh Jacobs lacks. And I think Javonte Williams being a true 3-down threat and having the potential to land in a spot that wants to use him in that sort of way could also trump Josh Jacobs being that 1 to 2, that first and second down runner that really relies on goal line carries to be fantasy relevant. So that's where I'm at with Josh Jacobs. He's obviously an incredible talent, and he runs behind a really good offensive line that was banged up a lot this year. But I don't want to invest that heavy of draft capital into a pretty one-dimensional asset.
I think that makes a lot of sense. I think with Josh Jacobs, like, I don't. It's a tricky one for me because if you look at what he's done through a couple of years, he's been a pretty damn good asset. Now, granted, he's a bit more boom bust, but that's kind of goes to the territory of anyone that's not a like elite top end workhorse. It's like a top 5 guy. At the running back 10 price though, it does seem a little bit too costly for me. So I think at that price, it makes sense to kind of explore some sales. I do think, this is why I'm like so like tricked out by like using ADP as a marker for a buy sell. Cause I think that's just not really, I don't think that's like where like people really value him, like I think like if you go out right now, like if he's going RB10, that means he's like a mid-second round pick. That would usually command like two middling firsts. I think if you go and try and get 2 middling first, Josh Jacobs right now, you get shot down like 9 times out of 10. So that's why I think the ADP is like probably a little bit out of touch with what's actually happening in reality. So, from that sense, I don't know how big of a sell he really is. And, I think people have cooled on him similar to to how you have cooled on him because we haven't seen that target volume. But if you look at what he's done in the past few years, he's been an RB1 back-to-back years as a 21-year-old, 20-year-old, 22-year-old. Puts him in pretty good company. I mean, but I guess the other way of looking at that is like, well, Leonard Fournette was also like a top end running back for the first 2 years, right? And then, for the first 2 years, similarly, Leonard Fournette didn't get much passing volume. So it wasn't until his third year that he actually kind of got that step up. So maybe Josh Jacobs gets a step up there. I wouldn't really bet on it too comfortably because they've been saying that for a couple of years. We just haven't seen it happen. But like, I agree with you that I would probably rather have him I would probably rather have like a Cam Akers over him. But I don't think it's by enough for me to like really like, put all my chips into it. I think I would definitely rather have Gibson over him. Aaron Jones again is like a little bit of a toss up for me there. So yeah, I think, it just really depends on what you can get in your leagues. I think a better trade would be like, especially if you're trading running backs like this, right? If you're in like a rebuild mode or something like that, would be to take like the David Montgomery and the Josh Jacobs of the world and flip for a wide receiver plus a rookie first. Like those are, I think the moves that are really going to cash you on money instead of trying to go running back for running back. It's those are like harder trades to make because a lot of people like view them as more lateral, but that's kind of where I'm at with Josh Jacobs. I do think he's worth exploring as a sell candidate. Maybe people are still kind of living off that rookie year hype, and they're still looking at those big games and still looking at the fact that he finished as an RB10 overall, even though on a points per game basis, he was like RB 15, 16 or something like that, which is actually where I have him ranked. I don't know where you have him in yours, but I have him in that range, like the middling RB2.
Yeah, I've been running back 16. My only concern for him too is, there is potential for the receiving game to be there because although he was in a timeshare at Alabama, that was kind of what he excelled at in terms of comparing him to other running backs that he shared the backfield with. But then again, he reminds me a lot of Joe Mixon, where the argument was,
Yep.
okay, it's next year, it's next year, it's next year. And next year never came. And the fact that Josh Jacobs now has a good offensive line and then maybe Derek Carr isn't there for the long haul. What if they go through a quarterback change? What if they draft a quarterback who isn't good and then now he's behind an aging offensive line with a bad quarterback and then you can't sell him? So for me, he's just somebody I'm trying to get off on. I gotta cut that shit out. Get
God
out on.
damn, you hate to see it. You hate to see it.
He's somebody I'm trying to get out on before it's too late. And I think if he is being valued anywhere near the 10th running back off the board, I think that's the prime time to sell a guy like that. Because I mean, the same arguments for Joe Mixon was that he's a great running back, a great running talent who has receiving upside, but neither of those things really materialize into fantasy production now 3-4 years down the line.
Absolutely agree. Okay, so next up on the list, we got DJ Chark. So, I mean, this is your boy. I mean, I actually had him as like someone I was willing to buy high on. I've cooled a little bit on him because I think, now that like Trevor Lawrence is going there, the hype is getting a little bit too crazy. Like whereas I already had him there, now he's like gotten that bump. So similar to like if I'm investing in the stock market, right? I have a target price for what I think a stock should be worth. Once it hits that, I'm like kind of fine getting out. And it's like, to me, it's like kind of shot beyond that now because of what people are doing. People are pumping it up even more because of Trevor Lawrence, right? I think at a price of wide receiver 25 is just way too rich for me, given that there's just way too many guys in that tier, right? So if I can trade from a wide receiver 25 down to like a wide receiver 30 and get a pick, I think those are the right arbitrage opportunities you'd be looking at. Like I'm doing my wide receiver ranks right now, and it is deep. It is really, really, really deep. I mean, I'm looking like 30, maybe even like 40, like 35 wide receivers deep, and I'm comfortable, right? I'm looking at guys like Adam Thielen, Jerry Jeudy, like as much people hate on him, Will Fuller, Brandon Cooks, Robbie Anderson. Like if I can flip into a lot of these guys and get a second round pick, get a first round pick, I think those are definitely the money moves to make. And if anything, like I think LaVisca is going to be more so the one to own there with Urban Meyer there.
Yeah, I think the issue too is we're acting as if DJ Chark already is the alpha, already has chemistry with Trevor Lawrence, and Urban Meyer wants to use him as the number one in this offense. Where when you look at this past year, and I know he was banged up a lot, but was he even the number one this past year? He did out target a guy like Laviska Shenault, but he only had 5 more receptions because those receptions that Laviska Shenault is getting are a lot closer to the line of scrimmage. They're more imaginative. They're not just deep throws that have a 50% chance of being completed. And Laviska Shenault was very good after the catch this past year. And we look what Urban Meyer did in college with guys like Curtis Samuel, with guys like Percy Harvin, with I think he had like Paris Campbell as well. He tends to favor these more gadgety type of wide receivers. But even beyond that, right, we remember back to college with Laviska Shenault. It's not like at Colorado he was just a gadget receiver. He was winning deep, and also like to the point of being a gadget receiver who's lining up in the backfield. I think a player like that, who is that dynamic, who showed out in his rookie year, who also dealt with injuries and came into the year a little bit banged up. I'm not so sure we can confidently say that DJ Chark is the clear-cut one in this offense, which at the price of wide receiver 25, whereas Shenault is hovering around wide receiver 40, that's kind of what's being suggested. And even if we look back to his best year, right, his second year in the league where he blew up and came out of nowhere, we'll write off his rookie season because whatever, it's Jacksonville and they probably didn't know how to develop him. They cut like fucking Alan Lazard, who was pretty good in Green Bay. We look at his second year. He is the definition of a boom bust receiver, and he does win you weeks, right? So that's not always the worst thing. But wide receiver 25 off the board, when you can get a guy like Will Fuller, who showed he could be a true alpha, but can also produce in a number 2 role this past season, a Cortland Sutton, who we touched on, I think last week, about how like much we like a guy like that, who is shown to be a true alpha in the face of target competition, or even a Deebo Samuel. Like, I will much rather trust a guy in a Kyle Shanahan offense that has produced with George Kittle on the field than a guy in an Urban Meyer offense coming to the NFL and hoping that DJ Chark is the number one. When in reality, look back to his best season, right? The guys who's competing with were Chris Conley and Dede Westbrook and Leonard Fournette out of the backfield. Now he has Laviska Shenault there, and the Jacksonville Jaguars have a whole lot of draft capital and a whole lot of cap space in a very deep, not only free agent class, but a wide receiver draft class. I wouldn't be surprised if they add another top tier talent to the wide receiver pool in Jacksonville. And if that happens, right, you're not going to be able to capitalize on this price as the wide receiver 25 off the board. So if you can go out and trade him and get a Will Fuller, who is currently the wide receiver 33 off the board, who is a little bit older and a little bit more injury prone, I guess you could say, I'd probably rather take Will Fuller straight up because I think he has a potential to be a true alpha and he can produce in a number 2 role. Deebo Samuel, if you can get him in like a second round pick, just because people are hyped up that DJ Chark gets to play with Trevor Lawrence right now, I would do that as well. Even straight up, I'd rather Cortland Sutton than him. And I know I did a video about Brandon Cooks yesterday. If you can get Brandon Cooks and a high second for a guy like DJ Chark just playing on that age arbitrage, I'd smash that every day of the week. Just because he's 3 or 4 years older doesn't mean he can't give you the same window of production. And then adding an early second where you can realistically get a Rondell Moore or maybe even a Jalen Waddle or even like a Mac Jones if you're quarterback needy, that's a deal that I would take basically any day of the week.
Yep, totally agreed. No arguments for me here. I think next up, all right, this is one that's probably going to trigger some people. So just want to let you know that I apologize for absolutely nothing. So if it triggers you, I don't give a shit. But here we go. Davante Adams. Okay. I love Davante Adams. He helped me win the Flay of the Public. He's one of my favorite wide receivers in the league. I think he's freaking elite, right? He's got the best release out of the entire NFL. The way he puts people on skates is incredible. And he's tied to Aaron Rodgers, who's obviously still playing at a very high level, right? But as I said in the beginning, sells are not always about selling shitty assets, and selling out on wide receivers at the peak is core to my dynasty strategy. I'm always doing it every year. Last year, it was DeAndre Hopkins. Before the season, I sold all my shares of DeAndre Hopkins, and I used him to acquire young studs and then rookie picks and additional assets that I felt like were on the rise. And I feel like this is another year where I can do that with the Davante Adams coming off a wide receiver 1 overall season, probably won a bunch of people their championships, probably carry them into the playoffs, had an incredible season in a year where I think passing and passing touchdowns, passing yardage, quarterbacks overall are very inflated, just given how COVID played out. We've seen it play out in shortened season before with the NFL strike. So all those factors together, I think that, we can get out on a Davante Adams, and you'll lose a bit on the points per game because Davante Adams is elite. I don't think he's going to fall off next year or the year after that, but his value will. I mean, I think this is the peak where he's at right now, being valued as wide receiver 2 overall in ADP and valued as wide receiver 1 overall in a lot of your leagues, I bet, especially if your league values, production and veterans and, they have that emotional attachment. You're going to get wide receiver 1 type overall prices for him. And I think at that point is when you can really get a nice profit. Like, to give you an example, last year when I traded out DeAndre Hopkins, what I traded him for is I traded DeAndre Hopkins, Keenan Allen for DK Metcalf, Calvin Ridley, and like Miles Sanders, something like that, right? Back when, before the hype, before Miles Sanders was the first round starter pick, before DK Metcalf blew up in the season. This is way before, when they were all like 3rd round, 4th round ADPs, right? And DeAndre Hopkins was still viewed as a top 3 wide receiver. I think you can get those similar type of assets and similar types of value. So I think, you could probably get Devontae Adams and trade him for like a CD Lamb plus, right? And people love CD Lamb, so maybe that's a little harder, but you could probably get T Higgins plus a first. I think that's an easy deal to take. You can probably get T Higgins plus a first plus more. And I think those are the types of deals where I'm always looking to trade down in the draft, but after the draft is over, I'm also always looking to trade down at the wide receiver position and get more assets and more potential value increases for assets that have been capped out. So that's why I'm selling Devontae Adams. Now, if I'm a top end contender, do I sell him? It really depends, right? If my team is so stacked, I might consider just keeping him and riding him out. But even as a contending team, you can make that trade and still continue to contend, right? Because I really think guys like T. Higgins and Cortland Sutton, they're going to take that next leap into the stratosphere, and then their value is going to shoot up, and you're not going to lose that much on the production. But like wide receiver isn't a place where you really need to get that much production edge anyways. You want to get that in other places. But like you could probably get Devontae Adams, sell him, and for like Michael Thomas plus. We talked about Michael Thomas as a buy low, right? And will Adams outscore Michael Thomas next year? Probably, right? But will Michael Thomas do as bad as he did last year as he'll do this year? Like, I don't think so, right? And I think you can probably squeeze out a first round pick, even if you're a contender. So I think these are types of avenues that I'd be exploring. Just whenever assets really peak like that, I think is a good time to explore. And I know that's probably not gonna, fly with a lot of people, and people might think I'm crazy. But I do think like these are the times where you can take advantage.
Yeah, and if you I know you mentioned a bunch of guys who you can sell for, a player plus a first. I think honestly, anybody from wide receiver 6 to 14, 15 in consensus rankings, you can easily get that player plus a first. So I think like a late first in Calvin Ridley, I would take that as well, because a late first isn't a late first. A late first is Rashad Bateman, who has the potential to be a Justin Jefferson, has also the potential to be a Henry Ruggs, but also has the potential to be a T. Higgins. So there are these upside plays. Like imagine before this year, Mike, you talked about selling DeAndre Hopkins, right? Imagine you sold DeAndre Hopkins for, we won't even use DK Metcalf because that's kind of an outlier. Let's just say some other middling wide receiver plus a late first round pick. That late first round pick turns into Justin Jefferson. Who would you rather have straight up now, DeAndre Hopkins or Justin Jefferson? And sure, not all your picks are going to hit, but those extra bullets to fire and those extra darts to throw only increase your odds of adding like elite depth to your roster. Plus, you also get a proven asset if you're going to make that deal. Trade Devontae Adams for an Amari Cooper plus a late first. Trade him for a Chris Godwin plus a late first. Any of these guys who have seemed to fallen off the map a little bit because of down seasons, like a Dak Prescott didn't play, which kind of hurt Amari Cooper, or Chris Godwin was banged up all year and everybody thinks Tom Brady's going to retire, even though he just won his 7th Super Bowl. Use that to your advantage and try to trade down at the wide receiver position. But again, as Mike said, if you do have Devontae Adams, if you just won your league and you have guys like a Tyler Boyd or a Keenan Allen or a Robert Woods as your wide receiver 6, 7, you do have that depth, then at that point, maybe just ride out Devontae Adams because you don't need as much depth, and the point per game advantage is legitimately like 7, 8, 9 points over most of those guys because he is a touchdown threat, a touchdown monster, and he produces in the face of terrible quarterback play as well. Like Deshaun Kaiser was throwing the ball, or like Brett Hundley, I forgot which one it was. He's still elite. So he is, for me, a top 5 dynasty wide receiver. But if you can trade down and get another piece to help build up upon your depth, because this is an extremely deep class, I wouldn't be opposed to it. And it's crazy to say, right? Because he had like 17, 18 touchdowns this year, playing 13, 14 games. But if you can get out on these top end assets who are aging, we make the joke about them being 35, but they are aging in situations with an aging quarterback, and you can move down to a Chris Godwin or a Calvin Ridley who are a bit younger, and the disparity there might only be 4, 5, 6 points a week, and you can add another piece on top to give you depth, then that's a move I would like be very willing to make.
Yeah, the other thing there is like, we joke about the age curve, but it's very real, right? Like if you're dealing with the dynasty market, like after 28, 29, like the value just tanks. So you could realistically sell Devontae Adams this year, right now, get out on him and get in on a CeeDee Lamb and Chris Godwin and still land that first round pick and end up with like Godwin plus Rondale Moore, right? And then a year or two from now, Devontae Adams will still be a really damn good player, and you'll be able to buy him back for a fraction of that cost. So those are the types of moves that you really need to think about making, is timing the market and the dynasty market.
Let me ask you this. Would you buy Julio Jones if you're a contender? Would you buy him
Absolutely.
for the 112 right now?
Oh, for the 112 in a super flex, who's going there?
Jalen Waddle.
Damn, I fucking love Jalen Waddle. I would if I really wanted to make that push, but I don't think you have to. I think you could pay a second
Yeah,
round pick
that's
for
what I'm saying.
Julio.
Because on the flip side, if somebody were to offer you the 112 for Julio Jones and you aren't necessarily competing, they're going to jump all over that. So just like you said, you might miss out on 1 to 2 years of Devontae Adams. But in that scenario, just throw out there, like Julio Jones next year, I'm not so sure isn't a top 5, 6 wide receiver, and you can buy him for a late first because he is aging. It's crazy to like sell and then buy in the future. But like Mike said, in the stock market, I'm not well versed in this, so this could be like completely wrong. But get out early and then get back in when people think it's too late, and then reap the benefits of a lower price tag at that age.
Yeah, and the other part of it you mentioned is like this is why understanding tiers is so important in your ranks. Like rankings by itself is so stupid, right? I don't. That's not how I draft at all. I look at my tiers, look at positional tiers, and I go down my chart, and that's how I approach a draft. Right? Understanding tiers is key because, like you said, if you're willing, like you have Devontae Adams as a top 3 wide receiver, I have him at wide receiver 5, right? But what's important is like within that same tier, I have Stephon Diggs, CeeDee Lamb, Tyreek Hill, Michael Thomas, or there's like 5 other guys. So at any point, if I can get anything on top of those guys for a Devontae Adams, I'm going to take it every single time because if we don't know much, but what I do know is this: everyone, I don't care who you are. I don't care if you're Matthew Berry. I don't care if you're Ray Garvin. I don't care if you're Mike Me Up. I don't care if you're FB God. I don't care if you're the Godfather, Nick himself. We all suck at projecting. Everybody. I don't give a shit. Like whoever it is, we all suck at it. I don't care if it's the most accurate fantasy pros projector of all time. I don't give a fuck. We all suck. Okay. So we're trying to like predict those inter finishes is damn near impossible. So what you really got to do is try to just predict ranges. And for players that fall within a certain range, you should always be willing to take the profit on the off chance that you're wrong, because more often than not, you are wrong. Right. So it's better to have that profit to fire that dice again. And even the trade down tiers. When you trade down a tier, that's when you can land the future first round rookie picks, right? Like I'm betting money that nobody has Chris Godwin and Devontae Adams in the same tier. Nobody has like Allen Robinson, Mike Evans, Calvin Ridley in the same tier as Devontae Adams, which means you could probably get a first round pick on top of all those guys for a Devontae Adams. And those are the types of deals that really sustain dynasties, right? And build dynasties. Like trading down at the wide receiver position, like I said, is the core of my dynasty strategy and the core of how I approach all of my teams. And it's the easiest way to profit because people want sure things in wide receivers. And when they see wide receivers produce well, they think it's going to last forever because of longevity or whatever it is. And that's like the easiest market to profit from. And in my experience, that's where I've always gone. It's a cash cow, and I've done it every single year, every single league. And more often than not, it's paid off. And sometimes it's burned me, but honestly, more often than not, it's paid off. Like, look at Stephon Diggs. Who the fuck thought Stephon Diggs would be a top 3 wide
I was
receiver?
just about to say that, Mike. That scenario I brought up before when I couldn't think of a receiver. Imagine trading DeAndre Hopkins for Diggs in a late first, which is a very realistic return last year when everybody thought Stephon Diggs would suck because they thought Josh Allen sucked. Now you get a wide receiver who's better and probably another wide receiver they picked at the 110 through 112 that's better than DeAndre Hopkins.
Yeah. Yeah. And you have that opportunity this year. You have Allen Robinson as a free agent. You have Chris Godwin as a free agent. These are the guys that you can go for and take advantage of that discount. So look, I don't want to tell people, but I do want to tell people because I love telling people. Devontae Adams to me is a great sell because he's at the absolute peak. There is nowhere else for him to go.
I agree as well. And I know this last one is also going to get on some people's nerves, seeing as how he just dominated in the Super Bowl as well. But we got Travis Kelce, man of the hour, probably the best tight end in the league. Mike is going to tell you why we're selling Travis Kelce, though.
Yeah, so it's a very similar thing. I think, again, if you're a true like top end contender, you're probably not selling Kelce, right? But that's not most people. Most people aren't like completely fucking dominating their league. Like I'm dominating a couple leagues, I'm not selling Travis Kelce. But if you're anything short of like that top elite tier of contenders, you should absolutely be selling Travis Kelce. Even if you think you have like just a good shot of making the playoffs, I think you got to sell him because again, what he did this year was incredible, right? And I think he'll do it. Like he'll do it again, like next year, maybe again the year after that. We don't know when the cliff's going to come. I think tight ends last actually a lot longer than wide receivers. So he probably has another 2, 3, 4 years, maybe even. But if you're not a top end contender, like people are living off the highs of Travis Kelce winning them a championship, right? And there's other guys out there like Darren Waller, who I'm a big fan of. I think Darren Waller is incredible. He's like a few years younger than Travis Kelce, and there's no reason for me to think that he can't come close to that production. He won't be exactly at that, right? But he could come close if they ever do get a QB upgrade, or if Derek Carr ever like takes off the blindfold when throwing deep. We'll never know. But I think Travis Kelce, DLF has him at tight end 2. I also have him at tight end 2 behind George Kittle. But I think, selling to a contender, because people have really felt the pain this last season of tight ends. I mean, we feel it every year, but we felt it a lot this year, right? Because we lost George Kittle. So all we had was Darren Waller and Travis Kelce. But I think you go out there and trade a Travis Kelce for Darren Waller plus, maybe Darren Waller plus a first, maybe Darren Waller plus a second, right? And I think those are like really good deals to make, because again, it kind of just extends your value. And yeah, you definitely lose a bit on the points per game, because the advantage Travis Kelce gives is massive. It's arguably better than anything else, any other position other than maybe like Christian McCaffrey. But you get to extend the life of your team, and you don't lose that much, right? Like the guys I'd be targeting with the Travis Kelce trade would be like Waller, Hawkinson, or Fant plus a first, right? Plus a second. I think those are the types of deals you'll be looking for. So I'm not saying to sell low on Travis Kelce. And again, if you're a top end contender, you're probably just gonna ride him in the sunset, and that's totally fine. But for most of us, like these are the types of assets you got to explore selling, because we don't know how long he's gonna last. I mean, I think he'll last a couple more years, but once he gets a couple more years tagged on, you're not going to get anywhere near the price you can get for him now. And now you can kind of capitalize and get a really, really, really good return. And, I think guys like Hawkinson and Fant like can be the next ones to take that step up. Maybe not like Travis Kelce tier, but take that next step up to becoming a consistent, weekly producer for your team.
Yeah, the thing is also, if I'm selling Travis Kelce, I'm not going to sell him unless I also get a tight end who has at least established his own value in return. If you're going to trade Travis Kelce for like Hayden Hurst in a first, that's not a return I want, because the difference between Travis Kelce and Hayden Hurst might as well be not even trading for a tight end at all. The difference between Travis Kelce is like 20 to 6 points. That's a 14-point gap. Whereas if you trade Travis Kelce for Darren Waller might score 6 less points a game than Travis Kelce, but he's also scoring 12 more than probably like the 7th tight end after him. So getting that positional advantage, although is crazy with Travis Kelce, it's also going to be a pretty good positional advantage to be put in a spot with Darren Waller or Hawkinson and maybe Fant, who I'm a little bit lower on than you are. But still, if you are making that trade down, Travis Kelce will give you a 100% chance, basically, of having a tight end advantage in your weekly matchup. But Darren Waller, the only weeks that you're going to be at a disadvantage of the tight end position are when you're playing Kelce, maybe Kittle, and maybe Mark Andrews if that team knows how to throw the ball again. And then if you add a first round pick on top of that, as we said, we rattled off the names and guys we like a Jalen Waddle, a Rondell Moore, a Rashad Bateman, maybe even a quarterback if they fall. The fact that you can get an elite tight end by trading down to Waller, Hawkins, and Fant, and then getting what could be the next Justin Jefferson, or just even like a wide receiver 20 to 24 type of valued guy, that type of return and getting younger and just adding depth on your team is something that you might regret, because Travis Kelce is crazy and crazily elite, if that makes sense. But in the long run, I think it's definitely going to help you getting younger, moving off a 32-year-old tight end for a 28-year-old tight end, and then also getting a 22-year-old receiver, maybe a 24-year-old quarterback on top of that. So for me, if I'm making these trades with these elite players, it's either to build depth or just get younger. And I think any of these trades that we outlined help you do basically both of those things.
Yeah. I mean, literally aside from Jared Goff, like I think no one on this list we're selling are players that we think stink, right? Like, is that fair to say? Like we think these are all really good players and they will contribute to teams. But what we do think is like you can capitalize and get some more value and like really build up that value in a crew to build up a dynasty. And you don't want to be like, I try to be a team that like kind of extends and builds a dynasty over multiple years versus a team that like that contends 1 year and then collapses the next year, and then contends 1 year and then collapses the next year, right? That's not a sustainable strategy. And the way to do that is to sell players when they're at the top, to get more shots at the rookie draft, to try and hit on the next Justin Jeffersons, try and hit on the next CeeDee Lamb. It's the only way to do it. And it seems risky for sure. I completely understand that. It seems so scary to sell out on a sure thing like a Devontae Adams, like a Travis Kelce, who are absolutely league winners, right? But dynasty winners are what we're looking for here. And dynasty winners are accumulated through the draft and through some of these young ascending assets. So that's really the way to look at it. And these just don't take these as like sell highs. they're not really meant as that way. They're more just like, hey, like capitalize on value and try and accrue high upside rising assets that we see down the line. And that's really what it comes down to. It's not about getting out on these assets desperately. It's more about getting in on potential value risers down the line.
Yeah, and if we were getting out on them desperately, what would be the chances of people wanting to buy them as well? So these guys definitely have a market other than maybe Jared Goff. We'll see what happens with his ADP with his trade that just went down. But like people are still buying Josh Jacobs, who I definitely don't like. People are definitely buying DJ Chark, and they're definitely buying all the guys that Mike named as well. They have markets, and I think if they do have markets and you also view them as being hyped up higher than what their perceived value in ADP is, that's the perfect time to go out and get them, especially before free agency, especially before the draft, where teams could realistically add pieces. Like the Jaguars could add maybe a Kenny Galladay. They could maybe add a wide receiver in the draft, and that'll just tank their value. So get out on them early, accrue rookie picks right now before they start to blow up, and just capitalize on the value like Mike said.
Yep. All right. That's all we got for you guys. Hope you enjoyed. If you did enjoy, hit that subscribe, hit that thumbs up. Let Noah know about his haircut. Let me know how bad my haircut looks. We know we're ugly, but you know what? Show us some love. Show us some love in the comments. If you guys enjoyed, hit us on Twitter, right? Follow Noah at FB God. Follow me at Mike Me Up with 2 P's. We are on Twitter all the time. Noah is basically just on there trying to make people big mad, and I love it. I'm on there trying to make people cry. This is what we do. We're on there, we're trolling, but we're also providing good content. We're providing some good info. If you guys stick around, if you guys pay attention, we are providing the good content, but we're also providing the memes, because that's what the fucking brand is about. All right. We cannot forget about the memes. All right. So that's all we got for you guys. Oh, also mock week, right? Get in on the Discord. Noah, Nick, and I haven't gotten in there yet because I've been busy, but I'll get in there too. We're hosting mocks. You know what how I feel about mocks, but at the end of the day, they're fun to do, and there's nothing else to do, and we want to get you guys some data to play around with. So that's what we're working on right now. So make sure you guys get in there. Just hop in the mocks channel. You can also volunteer to be a commissioner. How did they do that again, Noah?
They just DM either myself, Nick, or Mike, and we'll set you up with all the information on how to do that. And next week's video will actually be a mock draft with Mike, myself, and maybe even the Godfather, Nick. We're going to record it sometime this week. So this is coming out Wednesday. We'll probably record it sometime this weekend, so our times match up. And then we'll get that out to you guys next week so you can see how the ADP is shaking up.
Yep. Celebrity mock with the Godfather himself. So make sure you guys stay tuned. Stay tuned to all the videos. Make sure you check out the NBA Top Shots video. We got a sick new intro, courtesy of my boy, Tony DeBiase. Tony DeBiase helped us with that one. I got his name. I actually talked to him on Twitter. I did get it right, especially with the fingers. He appreciated that. So that's our boy over there. So make sure you guys check it out, man. Noah and I are loving that content. Even in the down market, we're going to be providing the content for you guys. So check those videos out as well. All right. That's what we got for you. Peace.